Hello and welcome to the Yarra Valley Living Centre. And today we're going to be speaking to Anne Naidu in our Living Well series. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Moni. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and we're going to speak about something very interesting, the intuition. So Anne's been sharing with me that her mother had a very astute, is that the word you use for intuition? Yes. Astute intuition. And you also seem to have picked that up from her.
Maybe.
And you've also studied about intuition. So, first of all, what is intuition?
Intuition is something that most people tend to say is a gut feeling. When people are making decisions or when people suddenly think about something, and they say, my gut feeling tells me that I should be doing this. And that really is what intuition is about.
Have you heard that the gut is the second brain, as they say?
Yes, there's two brains. That's correct. The gut.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
When they say the gut is the second brain, it is where people tend to say they got butterflies in their stomach. When they say butterflies in their stomach, they really have this gut feeling about different things. Whereas the brain is the reasoning part where it goes step by step. So that's the first brain, and the second brain is when you get this feeling within your gut.
Right. And how do you know when to trust that? That's the big thing, isn't it? Because Yeah.
I think trust grows with experience. I think the fact is that you may have had a gut feeling about a decision you were making, and you decided, no, I'd better not trust my gut. I'd better go with the reasoning. And then later on, you'd say, maybe I should have trusted my gut feeling about this. And that perhaps is the way you experience different things throughout your life. And then after a while, you realize, I think I can trust my gut feeling, and you do.
Actually, if there's two brains, probably it's a bit of a balance, as most things in life are a balance.
Yeah, there could be a balance, and the balance is the reasoning part. So your gut tells you something, and the big brain tells you, let's reason this step by step and see which is a better decision to make. Sometimes the conclusion is the same. At other times, the conclusion is different. And when the conclusion is different, then, of course, you will take it out to reason with other people. And you'll say, what about this decision? What do you think about this? My gut says this, and my reasoning brain says that. So what do you think? You get other people's opinion because you're still not sure about your gut feeling. So that's how you sort of tend to work on that.
And sometimes the decisions are very big. Yes. Like, for example, deciding to marry someone, you might get that gut feeling that this is the person, but it could be hormonal, it could be karmic, some past karmic account, and yet it seems to be like a gut feeling. So how would you work that one out?
That's a tricky one. And it's tricky because it affects emotions and sensing. Sensing is very different from intuition. So emotionally, you'll say, I sense this is a wonderful person, blah, blah, blah. But your gut feeling is saying, should I be thinking about this? Do I love this person enough to marry him? So you make a rational decision. And sometimes your gut says something totally different. And perhaps you could work it out. At other times, it may show that your gut feeling was correct. But how do you correct that? Your karmic cycle is your karmic cycle. Can you get away from your karmic cycle?
Right.
I think not. Have to go through your karma.
And you were telling me that your mother had amazing intuition.
She did. Amazing in that she was able to tell my brothers, do not take a particular road, take another road instead. And the reason for her telling them that was because she had this gut feeling that there would be policemen on that road, and knowing her sons drove very fast, she tried to prevent them from being caught. Another time I recall that my mum said to my brother, don't take that early flight, take the later flight. And for some reason, even though he had his tickets, etc., he managed to get the second flight. And sure enough, that first flight, there was a hijack attempt on the first flight. So Mum had this intuition that something was going to go wrong.
And
so
you all had a lot of faith in it sounds
we
like.
absolutely had faith in her. There were many times my brothers tested my mother's intuition. And yes, one brother did get a ticket. So thereafter, whenever my mum said, he listened. And we all listened because Mum was usually right.
Mm. And she had people from the whole town.
Yeah.
It was in South Africa, right?
That's correct, yes.
So people from the whole town used to come, and she used to help them in that sense of helping them make decisions.
My mother was, if in another life, she could have been a social worker. But she was there to assist anybody and everybody who came for assistance. And yes, people were having problems in their marriages, etc. And my mum would help them, sit them down, talk to them, and basically make them understand what the issues were. So listening to my mum, and my mum did it in different languages as well, because she spoke a few different languages. And my mother was, gentle, but prodding and able to assist people. She'd assist people with their children, assist people with food and cooking, variety of things.
And then from what I understand, your father helped people in a very different way. So your house must have been full of people all the time. What did your father do?
Coming. My father, when he was retired, my father used to own 2 hairdressing salons. In those days, he'd had this big haberdashery at the front, and he was fairly popular in the Durban city area. But then as he retired, he was what we call the armchair philosopher. He used to be seated in the veranda of our house. And because he had one son that was a detective, the other son was the Minister of Education, another son was a superintendent in schools, my sister was a nurse. So he had all people coming to him to say, so Mr. Raju, would you be able to assist us with this? My daughter needs to move from teaching in 200 k's away to coming closer home because she's missing the family and we are missing her. Would you be able to speak to your son, please, to see if you can get a transfer for her? And then the other brother, if there was any issues with, finding a murderer or finding a thief or finding people like that, those people would come to me, can you please ask your detective son to help us with this case? So my father was a sort of pivot person for a lot of people. They would come to ask him, and then he would call his sons and say, so son, I'd like you to come home today because we have this case, as though he was the detective himself. So it was very interesting that my father, sitting in his armchair, was able to assist so many people.
That's really interesting, because it reminds me of, in our organization, the senior teachers are generally very, very elderly women. And at our headquarters in Mount Abu, we have a courtyard, and they would sit in the courtyard and anyone could come up to them and speak with them. So sometimes it was just a hello, but any small little matters also used to get resolved. And of course, there's a whole army of help in the sense of the Brahma Kumaris. There's so much skill, and so she would call someone, and so I know what the armchair philosopher looks like. And you yourself have, seems like, inherited some of that intuitive ability from your mother. So first of all, let's talk about whether it is whether you're born with it or you've developed it. Did you learn from her, or is it because you have developed a trust in it, possibly because you saw it in action?
Well, it's interesting because when I was very young, I had gut feelings about different things, but it wasn't something I acted on, basically because I was young and immature and didn't really think about this as being gut feeling. But I would tell my friends, please, let's not go there. We'd rather go elsewhere. Instead of going into that particular area or that cinema, let's go somewhere else. So little things like that did matter, but I never realized why.
Even when you were younger?
When I was younger, Yes.
So it was quite natural.
Oh, very natural.
And your friends listened?
Oh, sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes we wore the effects of not listening because, things would happen. And being university students as well, we'd be chased out of certain cinemas, etc., because we didn't adhere to the principles and stick with what we needed to do.
Yeah.
But later on in life, I realized that this intuition was there to assist me. I'll give you the typical example of a dream that I constantly had. I used to have a dream when I was quite young, and even after I married, I constantly got this dream about being an American Indian, running down a hill from the hut on the top, running down a hill to a river that had a weeping willow tree. And when I was running down, I could see a man also in red Indian outfit, and he was stabbed by a spear. And it was my husband in the dream. And all I can hear is myself screaming. And many times in the night, my husband woke me up and other family members woke me up because I was screaming in my dream. So I've had this dream for many years. And then when I was about 58, 59 years old, I went to America, Tennessee. When I went to Tennessee, my brother said to me, what happened? You were screaming in your sleep last night. And then he took me, he's got a house in Tennessee in a place called Kingsport, which is up on a hill. And he said to me, come downstairs with me after I told him my dream. And when I went downstairs, he showed me a picture of this land on which this house was built. And sure enough, it was a green hill, the river down at the bottom, and the weeping willow tree was right there. After that day, I had one more dream, and I never had that dream again. It seemed like that was the place that I was dreaming about constantly.
And you had an experience in that second dream.
Yes.
That's also interesting, how it brought a closure.
It's amazing, amazing. The second dream, we're talking about the American Indian dream that I had. Yes, a couple of nights after, it was the night after, I dreamt that I was in the American Indian trading place, which was just down the road from this Kingsport house. And I had visited this trading place. But in my dream, I was actually in there, and it seemed like it was a restaurant. And I went in, and I'm having a cup of coffee in there. And as I'm having my coffee, all I could see were American Indian men dressed in the traditional garb. And then suddenly I saw an older man walk in, and everyone, all the men, geared towards this older man as he sat down. Now, having looked around, there was no other female there, and I thought, no, I better get away from here. As I got up to walk away, the older man said, stop, I need to talk to you, stop, And then I turned around and I walked. He commanded me to come forward. Being commanded in such a way, I went closer to him. And then he said, I have been waiting for you for a very long time. And my dream ended.
And
I never had that dream again. So it was amazing, really amazing. So that is part of intuition, because intuition is also listening to your dreams. And this is an example of that.
So what have you learned? Like, you've done quite a lot of studies, and you said in the many courses you did, intuition was a part of so many of those courses. What kind of courses?
Courses about management, courses about behavioral sciences. There's a number of social work, humanitarian work. There's a number of different courses that I have done that included what happens if you have this type of feeling, this gut feeling. How do you make your decisions? Yet I know legally in a court of law, which was also something that came in, you cannot just rely on your gut, because you've got to produce facts. In management tend to make decisions based on fact. But many managers that were at the courses with me said, had we trusted our gut, we would not have hired so-and-so.
It's interesting, because I remember years ago, a series about doctors. And I was quite surprised, because they said that even though they've got all this medical training, they said actually the symptoms that present could be so many things. And basically it's mostly up to their intuition. And I was thinking, really,
Whoa.
with all their training, it's still intuition. So like you say, even with all the training in management,
Yeah.
it still comes down to the
To the
intuition.
intuition. Because you will notice that people hire, when people hire, they look to see, is that person personable? Is that person going to be the right fit for my office? These are the things that they will reason about. But then some managers say, no, I just trusted my gut feeling about this person. And sure enough, the person fitted in. So these are the type of courses that I have done and type of courses that I will be running in the future.
Yeah. And I know when I've been looking for like a meditation center, I remember in Hong Kong, I went into one place and it was so derelict. It used to be a place where they, a warehouse for fishing tackle, so there's to store the fishing lines and everything. And I said to the person, we both looked at each other and said, oh no, this is our place. So even though rationally it wasn't what we wanted, but the feeling was, this is it. So this is the one we're going to go with. And it's still our center in Hong Kong, actually.
How amazing is that?
After 20, 30 years. So you told me about another experience, a few experiences.
I'll tell you about a second one that happened to me in 2 years ago when I was in South Africa. For many, many years, after, say about 9-10 years, I've been dreaming about a huge white refrigerated truck hitting me in my car. And I could see my body, my outer body, going up into the air. So I practically died in that car. That was my experience. Now, I've had this dream many times, and I used to tell my sister, God, I don't know why I'm having this dream yet again. When I went to South Africa about 2 years ago, my friend and I decided to explore Cape Town. So I hired a car, paid full insurance for once. Normally I wouldn't. Paid full insurance, and we drove down to a particular place where there were 6 lanes, 3 lanes coming and 3 lanes going. The town that we went to was a fishing town, and refrigerated trucks carried fish up and down. Empty trucks going in and full trucks going out. So having turned into this road, I swear to you, there was nothing coming. I never saw a refrigerated truck coming. But as I turned into this 3-lane highway, it was a 6-lane highway, a refrigerated truck hit me. And as it hit the car was spinning in the middle of the road. And I suddenly heard a voice saying, tap your brakes gently and move to the side of the road. And I did that. I had the ability to do that as the car was moving. It was incredible, this voice. The voice was the voice of my eldest brother who had passed on. And as I just moved the car to the side of the road, another refrigerated truck came from the other side. So it had just missed us by an inch. And that was the dream that I had. And thank God we were not hurt. The policemen were there, the tow trucks were there, many tow trucks in South Africa. And of course, the ambulances were there as well. And the ambulance officer was quite surprised. He says, you're not shaken. I said, no. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. You sure? I said, no, nothing's wrong with me. But it was a matter of preparation. That dream had prepared me for that. So when I went to the side of the road, I wasn't shaking, but my friend was like a leaf shaking, absolutely horrified. So that is intuition as well. So you've got to listen to these dreams if they keep coming into your thoughts here.
And do you have intuition about what's going to happen to someone else?
Yes, there are many times that I've had this intuition. I'll tell you the one.
Because I know some people who've had that, and it's quite scary for them. They don't like it.
No,
they wish they wouldn't.
That's true. I wish that truck dream hadn't happened to me, but thank God
that was good.
Waited. Yeah,
that was good.
One example is where I was invited to a wedding in my husband's family, and I did go to South Africa, and this wedding was taking place. But just before the wedding was taking place, I had a horrible, horrible feeling. And this feeling was that this marriage wouldn't last.
That's not a very nice feeling to
No,
have
it's a
when you go to a
horrible
wedding.
feeling.
Oh my
And
gosh.
how do you advise people
And
about
do
something
you?
like this?
Yeah.
And do you advise people? I decided to let the aunt know because she'd lost her husband, and it was just her doing this massive wedding where tons of money was spent. And I was thinking,
So it was the mother of the
mother
bride.
of the bride, yes. And I did say to her, I think you should be careful. Have you checked everything you should have about the young man and about this wedding? And, you should be very careful about this wedding. And of course, it was very hard for her to understand my concerns.
At that time.
At that time.
She must have been so excited and
she was
in that
thrilled about
mood
it.
of wedding and
and having spent such a lot of money on this glamorous wedding, very expensive jewelry and expensive
it's the last thing you want to hear.
It's not something you want to hear. But unfortunately, after the wedding, wasn't even a week or 2 weeks, they discovered that the young man was gay. He should never have married. And they did not know anything about him. And he only decided to let them know after the wedding, after all the money was spent, after everything had happened. And then she called me to let me know that this was the situation and she should have listened to it. But strangely enough, I had an intuition about her other daughter. But I never told her anything about it because I thought, judging from the reaction of the first daughter and what had happened, I thought, no, I cannot say a word. Sure enough, a couple of weeks later, the second daughter, who lives in New Zealand, divorced her husband. So it was a very sad time for my husband's aunt. But this is it. Do you tell the person or don't you tell the person? It's a considered decision.
And like with the second one, what could be served by telling her? What benefit could you bring, except maybe to prepare her?
To prepare her. I think it was devastating because she was happy that at least one daughter, she's got 2 daughters. One daughter is married and she's settled and she's happy, she's got children, and she's okay. And then this happened.
Oh, dear.
So maybe the preparation could have helped, but by the same token, it could have damaged her quite badly. So it was better that it happened the way it did. So it's scary when you have a opinion about somebody else. You've got to be very careful how or whether you should tell them or whether you shouldn't.
But you told me of another situation about another person where it actually did help.
I'm trying to think of which one.
The one at the office, the one the lady was going to work.
Oh, yes. Oh, that was incredible. I had this terrible gut feeling about my friend and that she should not go to work that day. I felt that if she had gone to work that day, she would have been fired. And knowing my friend very well, I said to her, look, I didn't know how to tell her you'd be fired if you go to work. If I did tell her that, she would have gone to work to check whether it was true. So knowing my friend quite well, I decided that I was going to take the day off work. And I asked her to take the day off work. And I said, look, I need you. I really, really need you to come out with me today.
So it was a trick.
It was a trick. I did trick her. But having tricked her for our own benefit. And we had a lovely day out. We did everything we wanted to do. And the next day she went to work. Sure enough, her boss said to her, had you been here yesterday, you would have been fired for all this work that you've done. That's incorrect. And he said, at least my mood is better today. So if you consider what he said to her, that intuition was correct. So I'm glad I took her out for the day. She's still working there, by the way.
And you said something interesting. I remember that she had then the opportunity to clarify that it wasn't even her mistake that she would have been fired for. But when you're fired in that heat of the moment, you can't really do anything.
No, it wasn't her mistake. It was actually the boss not really checking his facts. He should have checked his facts. But had she been there on the day, she would have been the one on firing line. But after he got to know exactly what happened, she was fine. And she actually got promoted. And I think he left the organization and she took his position.
Right.
So what a turnover.
Wow.
What a change.
So then it's very beneficial to let the other person know, but nicely that you...
I would
took it on yourself.
Yeah. I think had I told her look, your boss is going to fire you if you go to work today, she would have gone, because
Yeah.
she is a fiery person. Yeah.
And is it too personal to speak about your husband?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm going to tell you about the 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. My husband died after 2.5 days, but I'll tell you what happened before that. On the Thursday, we had a canasta game. We play canasta with other couples. So we played canasta it's a card game with this couple, and we finished off at 2:00 in the morning. So we had fun on the Thursday. On the Friday, we went out to another couple and we had dinner with them. And that too was a pretty late night. We had lots of fun with them and, just laughing, joking, dancing and doing all kinds of things. On the Saturday, I went to the February 14th Valentine's Day dance. And at the Valentine's Day dance, I don't know, we dressed up beautifully. We decided we were going to wash up.
Going to be Valentine's.
Yes, we're going to be Valentine's and dress up very well and go to this dance. And we enjoyed ourselves. It was fun dancing and talking and chatting with everybody. And another friend of ours, a lovely friend, came over and she said, "You two look so beautiful together. You look really gorgeous." And the next minute, a chill went down my spine. It was like something's going to happen. Something's wrong. It was like a gut feeling, but I just couldn't pinpoint it. Sure enough, on the Sunday, so that was Saturday, on Sunday, it was my ex-son-in-law's brother's birthday, 30th birthday. For the first time in his life, my husband sang karaoke. He sang Boy George's song, Come a, Come a, Come a Chameleon Man. And I never heard him sing. As far as I was concerned, he couldn't sing for peanuts. And he sang that song. He enjoyed it, first time karaoke. So he had a good time. And he came home at about 9-ish or something that night, 9:10, with my daughter, because I had to go early. At about 1 a.m, he began coughing. And this coughing was really, really bad. It's like, he couldn't breathe. Mm. So I realized, he said to me, "Take me to the hospital." He would never say that. Never, ever. Mm. So I raced him to the Box Hill Hospital. And when I got there, I parked the car in the ambulance bay. And then when I went in, sure enough, his last words to me were, "Take the car, move the car to the parking bay, and please take my things from the pockets." And that was his car keys, his purse, and his wallet. Those were the things he left, Moni. Mm. And he passed away 2.5 days later. Those were his last words to me. Mm. But that gut feeling that I had when my friend said, "You look so beautiful together," was this, but I couldn't pinpoint it.
Did it help in any way?
Not really, but afterwards I kept thinking, my God, I wish I had listened closely to that gut feeling. Because when you get a gut feeling, listen, go away to somewhere quiet and listen and try to understand what the message is that's coming through. That is very important. Yeah, should have done that in hindsight.
So back to our original question. Thank you for sharing such a personal experience. So going back to our original question, are we born with this intuition or can it be developed?
Now, this is interesting because there is something called sensing. Sensing is where you learn how to develop your senses of looking at people, judging their faces, looking at how their hands are moving, and making decisions based on sensing. So sensing is not intuition. Intuition is something you're either born with or you develop as you're growing. But to develop intuition, you must understand emotions. You must understand, it's very deep inside. It's a decision within you that suddenly just comes. Whereas sensing is something that you learn. So if you ask me whether you can develop intuition, maybe you can, Moni. Depends. You probably need to be able to make or trust your gut when something comes up, and then perhaps write it down and go away and think about it and go away to a quiet place and try and see whether that feeling was correct. Or write it down and test it to see whether it was your intuition or whether it was sensing or whether it was reasoning. There's a difference between the three.
And do you think meditation helps someone to develop intuition?
It could help it, but it depends on, once again, whether you are using sensing or whether you're using reasoning or whether you actually are intuitive. So I think it is an individual thing. Maybe sometimes you're born with it. And I have a feeling that in my family, a couple of us were born with it. We had this from very young. And I think other people develop what they think is intuition, but they shouldn't make the mistake when it's sensing and you're looking at people and you're judging and you're learning. That's totally different to intuition, which is a gut feel.
I think I've developed intuition because I think intuition, in my understanding now, is like the heart of the intellect. It's like the deepest part of the intellect that's deeper than the rationale. And I trust my intuition now. So it's usually not very big things, but I make decisions based on that. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people with this intuition, they will judge, or sorry, they will make decisions based on the intuition if they trust it.
Yeah.
And trust comes from experience. So over the years, you might have had the gut feeling, but you didn't trust it. But if you trust it and you can see that it does work, it is honest, it is true, you will gradually start developing it that way. So that for me is intuition and developing it.
And as we were talking about the intuition, just briefly, because I know we're coming to the end, but you were talking about a time in your life. It's not really on the topic of intuition, but I just found it really inspiring that at one point in your life, you had young children at school, you had a full-time job, you were studying to do your master's, and you volunteered for Lifeline, of all things, where it's very taxing on your emotions, for 5.5 years at night. I just found that amazing.
I wonder where I had the energy. I don't have that energy anymore. But at that time, I had come to Australia in 1988, so it's a long time ago. But this was around 92. 92, young children, 2 young girls, and they could be taxing as well, and working a full-time job, 9 to 5. And I was studying, I was doing my master's in information science at the time. And I thought, I want to do something. It was weird how this happened. I'd seen a lady called Margaret Appleby, who was in New South Wales, and she was in charge of Lifeline. And I met her and she gave a talk, and I thought, wow, this woman inspires me. And because she inspired me, I thought, no, I'm going to give up some of my time to Lifeline.
Your time means your sleep.
That's right.
It's the only time you had left.
It was like, and having a husband and cooking for a family and making lunches in the morning. It was, I don't know whether I was irrational or not, but it was a wonderful time in my life. I made wonderful friends at that time too. So it was a case of leaving home at 9 o'clock at night, say about 8:45, it was about 15 minutes away, going to the Lifeline offices. This is after I put my kids to bed, after I'd done their homework, after I'd prepared, they had dinner and they were fed and washed up, and my husband was going off to bed. And 3 days a week, I would go off to Lifeline and work overnight and come back at 5 in the morning. So there were 2 of us in the Lifeline office, and we had many cases, believe me. It was not easy life. It was quite difficult. Having some of those cases were pretty scary. And coming back at 5 o'clock in the morning, rushing, making lunches and doing everything I had to do, and to be at work at 9 o'clock again, send the kids to school and then continue working.
So my question is, where did that energy come from?
I have no idea.
It doesn't sound really possible.
No. Doesn't sound possible, but it is. We did have sleep. My friend and I, we always tended to be together. So she and I shared the Lifeline shift for the night. So she'd take 2 hours of sleep and I'd take 2 hours of sleep. If we could get the sleep, depending on the cases that came in. If it was full moon, we never slept. Full moon is about the worst time
yeah.
when it comes to lifeline calls.
Mm.
We would be on the phone for hours. But where the energy came from, even now, I cannot tell you. But I was glad that I had a supportive family and supportive friends. And of course, the weekend, I think I crashed on certain days.
And Mrs. Appleby must have given you a lot of inspiration.
Mrs. Margaret Appleby is and always has been an inspiration in my life, yes. She was a wonderful woman who was of Aboriginal origin, but such a wonderful woman who was able to get lots and lots of people to go and do lifeline work. It was amazing.
Yep. So do you think it was fulfilling in some way that the rest of your life, even though it was a great life, was just something missing that you needed to?
Perhaps I was in the wrong space, Moni, because I am, in many ways, lots of people would come to me, even when I was in the library in South Africa as a librarian. Many people would come to me for marriage advice.
Like with your mum?
Like with my mum. They would come to the library and ask me for advice about their children, about their marriages. Could I talk to their husbands for them? Could I, counsel them together? So perhaps I was in the wrong space. I should have been in counseling and social work or somewhere in that space.
And sometimes when we're doing what really is our speciality, like what we're born to do, there's just like an emptiness if we're not doing that. So, possibly it filled something.
I think working for Lifeline has. It was a tremendous experience. I loved it. I was scared at many times by some of the cases, but I learned so much more about the deeper emotions of people. I learned about children and about older people and how they felt, and about weirdos as well. When I say weirdos, I mean those are the people that came out of the woodwork when it was full moon. And we'd get all kind of crank calls and all sorts of issues. So I learned about many different types of people in my time at Lifeline.
Which has served you well, I'm sure.
Beautiful. I enjoyed that time.
So you're quite new to meditation. Are you, or you've been doing it for many, many years in your own way?
I think I do meditation in my own way. I could go and sit on the beach for hours on end and look at the sea. That is something that I love to do. And just sit there and watch the waves. That is something that I love to do. But I am learning how to look at the light and meditate. That is something that I'm learning here. But you could leave me on the beach and I could sit there for hours.
Could you close our session with just 2 or 3 minutes of something guided, whether it's the beach or the light or whatever you like? Just 2-3 minutes.
You mean talking? Yes. So imagine the waves in the sea, and the sea is blue. And out there, the sun's rays are actually touching the sea. And you can see those rays so clearly. And you can see the sun as it's setting with its rays all out. The orange sun touching the sea, and the sea shows the orange glow. And it's absolutely beautiful to see. And as you watch the sea and you watch the sun, your mind empties of everything. And you just think of nothing except the beauty in front of you. And that is one of the best ways of meditating and clearing your mind of everything.
Yeah, lovely, because that's the thing. We don't have to go to the sea. That's the beauty of meditation, that wherever we are,
you can just see it.
We can have our little journey with the mind.
Absolutely. Certainly can.
We can travel. We can imagine. We can do so many things.
Especially now in COVID, you can travel in your mind anywhere in the world that you want to.
So thank you very much, Anne. That was very insightful.
Welcome.
And I think it's probably given a lot of the listeners a reminder of maybe some of the intuitive things that have happened to you in your life, and maybe a little bit of inspiration to see if we can develop that intuition so that it can be helpful, because it's very difficult nowadays to know whether to go left or right. So intuition could just help us.
Help us in the journey of life. Yeah.
So absolutely. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
And see you all next time.
And thank you for having me, Monique.